Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the unbelievable, true story behind history's most infamous conqueror. We're going to bypass the centuries of wild legends and pull directly from the historical records to separate fact from fiction. And let me tell you, it's a story so massive in scale, it is honestly hard to believe it actually happened.
When you hear the name Genghis Khan, what pops into your head? You probably picture this ruthless warlord just sweeping across the plains, leaving total destruction in his wake. And, as our sources today will show, there is absolute truth to that staggering human cost. But there's also a completely different side of the story. We're talking about a visionary who instituted strict meritocracies, fundamentally bridged the East and West, and honestly laid the groundwork for the connected modern world we live in today. He is a figure of extreme duality.
So here's our roadmap. We'll start with 1. The abandoned outcast. 2. Uniting the steppe. 3. The social revolution. 4. The global conqueror. And finally 5. A complex legacy. Let's get right into it with part 1, the abandoned outcast, survival on the steppe. Imagine being born into total aristocratic privilege, only to have it ripped away in an instant. He actually wasn't born Genghis Khan. His given name was Temujin. When he was just 8 years old, his father, Yesugei, was poisoned by rival Tatars. And just like that, his own tribe completely abandoned Temujin, his mom, and his siblings. They left them to die out on the brutal Mongolian steppe. They were instantly reduced to a desperate hunter-gatherer lifestyle, literally foraging for wild roots and catching tiny fish in the river just to keep from starving.
His early life, frankly, was pure chaos. It wasn't this smooth, inevitable rise to power. It was a gritty, day-to-day fight for survival. Around 1170, his dad is poisoned, and he's an outcast. Fast forward to about 1177, right after he gets married, his own wife, Berthe, is kidnapped by a rival tribe. He had to literally beg for military alliances just to go rescue her. And even as he finally started gathering some followers, he got absolutely crushed at the Battle of Delen Baljut around 1187. His trajectory was anything but a straight line up.
Because he was an outcast, Temujin couldn't rely on his own tribe or blood relatives, so he had to look elsewhere. He formed an anda, which is a traditional Mongol blood brotherhood oath, with another boy named Jamuka. They traded knucklebones and arrows, and even slept under the same blanket to seal the bond. It's wild to think about, but this childhood reliance on chosen family and personal loyalty, rather than inherited tribal bonds, became the literal foundation for his entire future empire.
Which brings us to part 2, uniting the steppe. Alliances and betrayals.
Out on the steppe, power was completely fractured among heavy hitters like the Tatars, the Naimans, and the Karat. Temujin started absorbing these tribes one by one. His tactic? He'd often execute the old aristocratic leaders and then just integrate the common warriors right into his own ranks. But, as you can guess, this massive rise to power totally threatened the old-school traditions. To achieve ultimate supremacy, he had to cross a devastating line, going to war with his own blood brother, Jamuka.
That war pushed Temujin to rock bottom. He was betrayed by an ally, his forces were decimated, and he had to retreat to the muddy waters of Lake Boljuna. And this is where it gets absolutely fascinating. He shared that muddy water with his remaining guys and swore the famous Boljuna Covenant. But get this, the guys with him, they were Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists, spanning 9 completely different tribes. They were united by absolutely nothing except their unwavering loyalty to Temujin. It was the exact blueprint for his future state. Loyalty mattered more than your bloodline, period. Now let's look at part 3, the social revolution, forging a new state.
By the year 1206, he called a Kurultai. This is basically a massive traditional Mongol political and military assembly held at the source of the Anan River. It was here that Temujin officially took on the title Genghis Khan, a name with serious weight, translating to something like universal ruler or fierce ruler. But he didn't just rebrand himself with a scary new name. He launched massive, sweeping administrative reforms to make sure the endless tribal warfare of his youth was gone for good.
He quite literally tore down the old societal structures. Think of it like a strict modern corporate meritocracy, but enforced back in 1206. Under the old system, your loyalty belonged to your aristocratic clan leader. Genghis said, nope, not anymore. He deliberately broke apart the old tribes and mixed warriors into brand new units. Your promotion wasn't based on who your dad was, it was based 100% on your skill, your courage, and your loyalty. He was promoting shepherds and carpenters to the absolute highest ranks of his military just because they got the job done better than anyone else. He reorganized his entire society into a brilliant decimal system, squads of 10,
companies of 100 and regiments of 1,000. And sitting at the very top, the Kishig. This was his elite personal bodyguard made up of exactly 10,000 men. The scale of just this one unit is staggering. It wasn't just a military force either. It functioned as a rigorous military academy and the administrative core of his entire government. Serving in the Kishig was the ultimate privilege, and it became the training ground for his most legendary future generals.
Now, you'd probably expect the most powerful guy on the planet to be dripping in gold and jewels, right? Not Genghis. We actually have this incredible excerpt from a letter he sent to a Taoist patriarch. He brags about wearing the exact same clothes and eating the same food as the cowherds. He completely rejected luxury. Instead of hoarding the spoils of war for the aristocrats, he divided everything equally among his men. He even told his commanders to drop the formalities and speak to him casually, and he actually welcomed their criticism. He truly, genuinely viewed his army as his brothers.
Moving on to Part 4, the Global Conqueror, Expansion and Devastation.
Initially, the Mongols really just wanted to trade with the massive Islamic Khwarezmian Empire to the west. But the local governor in Otrar made a fatal mistake. He executed Genghis Khan's trade envoys. For the Khan, this was the ultimate, unforgivable betrayal, and his response was basically apocalyptic vengeance. He pivoted from trade to total war, leading his forces across the desert in a brilliant pincer movement. The urban warfare that followed was horrifically brutal. Entire iconic cities, places like Bukhara, Samarkand, and Herat, were just wiped off the map. Millions of people died in what can only be called a demographic catastrophe, cementing his image forever as a ruthless conqueror.
But here is the massive historical paradox we have to grapple with. Out of all that terrifying destruction came a totally unprecedented era of global connection. By taking absolute control over the vast stretches of the Silk Road, Genghis essentially created the world's very first global free trade zone. For the very first time in history, a single political entity bridged Europe and Asia. He protected the merchants, set up legal codes, and recruited specialists, scholars, engineers, administrators from all across his conquered lands. This sparked a massive exchange of technology and ideas that fundamentally rewired human civilization.
And that leads into our final section, Part 5, A Complex Legacy, How the World Remembers Him.
So the man conquered the known world. But you know what he forgot to do? Leave a functioning will. Genghis Khan died in August 1227, likely from an illness while out on campaign. He had built the largest contiguous land empire in human history, but he totally lacked a sustainable succession plan. He just divided the territory up among his sons. Without a clear mechanism to peacefully pass the torch, local interests naturally started to clash. Within just a few generations, his incredible life's work totally fractured into competing realms, like the Golden Horde over in Russia and the Yuan dynasty down in China.
And because his massive empire fractured, his historical legacy fractured right along with it. It's actually wild how differently he's viewed depending purely on where you're standing. In Mongolia today, he is literally worshipped as a founding father and a deity, celebrated for bringing the rule of law and uniting the nation. But ask the Arab world or Russia, and he's remembered as an apocalyptic monster, the Tatar yoke, whose conquests were deeply destructive and set back their civilizational progress for centuries. Meanwhile, over in modern China, he's often revered as a great national hero. It's the exact same historical events, viewed through totally opposite lenses.
And that brings us to the big, unavoidable question. Was Genghis Khan a visionary who connected East and West, built a strict meritocracy and launched global trade? Or was he a brutal warlord responsible for unimaginable death and devastation? The crazy truth is, he was inextricably both. So I'll leave you with this to ponder. How on earth do we weigh the creation of our connected modern world against the staggering human cost it took to build it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history you think you know.